Hey, hi guys. Welcome to the Northwest Geology Guy. My name is Scott, and I hope you're all doing well. Cold season, flu season's in full stride, but I hope you guys are all in good health. Tonight, we're going to start talking about the slow slips events, or the ETS. That stands for episodic tremor and slip. This occurs inland on the Cascadia subduction zone from up here in where the subduction zone begins up here in Vancouver Island, and it goes all the way down and follows it all the way down to almost Menlo Park area, the end of the subduction zone. And you'll never see any of this outside of the subduction zone, and it's not really common just to the Cascadia area. Japan has it. I know Alaska has it, but it's not too well studied up there. But I've found that there's evidence that every major subduction zone on the planet has ETS events. Some are more pronounced than others, and that depends on if there's locking at the plate boundaries, or how severe the locking is. Like for us in the Cascadia, it's totally locked. Nothing's moving at the plate boundary. And that's why for many years, scientists, after they discovered plate tectonics, were looking at all these subduction zones and stuff and going, wow, that's perfect proof for plate tectonics back in the 60s. But everybody just kind of ignored the Cascadia subduction zone because they thought that they couldn't explain why there was no major earthquakes going up and down on the subduction zone.
Earthquake magnitude 4.6. Tajikistan.
Excuse that. That's my earthquake notification. That scared me as well. But for many years, they never could figure out why there was just never any big earthquakes on there. The theory was that all the sediment coming down, like the Columbia and other major rivers in there, lubricated the subduction area, so it was just nice, neat subduction, nice straight, no obstructions. But it wasn't until Chris Goldfinger and Brian Atwater started doing some major research out here that people really started to take notice about it and figure out or realize how dangerous this area really is. Because Brian Atwater found evidence offshore with core samples taken out there at the base of all the major canyons up and down the subduction zone, and found turbidites, which are like sediments inside there that range from very large to very small, and then it goes on to just mud and stuff. But he started noticing that all the canyons had these, and where, like, if a major earthquake happened, it caused a major landslide down the canyons. And he's found that there was up to 24 earthquakes. Oh, I'm not sure if that's right. Okay, I forgot. I didn't write that down. But he found that in the southern half of it, there was 22 more sediments found than in the northern section. So it's his understanding that the evidence shows that there was 22 additional partial ruptures on the southern end of the subduction zone than in the northern, which is good for me. I live up in Washington, so that's just fine. You guys can keep having them down there. But if you look on the chart here, like Ben Ferriolo always says, look at the graphs. That way you can get an idea of what all these colors mean. Now, is the purple means that these are the first to show in, and the depth. It started right up here in Vancouver. And the blue came next with a little deeper. But as you can see here, that it started here, jumps down to the Puget Sound area, and then starts its way back up and clusters up into Vancouver Island again. This is very common. They can bounce all around. You never know where they're going to occur next. It runs in a 14-month cycle, thereabouts, pretty close, almost like clockwork. And it lasts for approximately 2 weeks, sometimes a little longer, a little shorter, but generally it's around an average of 2 weeks duration. And, you know, if that isn't interesting enough, then you go on to, we'll get to that a little bit later in the video, but here's another image I want to show you. This is today's image on the tremor map. As you can see, there's nothing happening anywhere, which is kind of good. But you can find this at the PSN. Wait. God, where did I put that? But it's the Puget Sound Seismic Network has this on here. And I'm sorry about that. I'm a little confused today. It's been a long day. But it's not showing any activity whatsoever. But I tried to select some of these that showed different amounts of activity. Like over here, there's a cluster up here at the tip of Vancouver Island. A little bit down on the peninsula out there. And into just a little bit into the Puget Sound area. But nothing down here in California. So it's kind of minor activity. Here's another one. It's showing more activity up in BC. And a little bit down in Oregon this time. But this is where I wanted to show you where these occur at. And this happens down here in the subduction zone where the Juan de Fuca is going down, subducting into the mantle. This is the lock zone up here where nothing is moving whatsoever. But here in the transition zone, it's like a rubber band being slowly stretched apart. But what happens in during an ETS event or slow slip event, as for the 2-week period, it stops and starts to slowly and inch back for the duration of the event. So instead of it going down, it's coming back up again. And then after the event is over, it continues subducting again. And this happens for us every 14 to 14 and a half months. Now, Oregon has about a 10-month interval between the events. California is about 12. And you can almost set your clock to these events. But that's how, or that's where it happens. And then they're so slight little pops that they're undetectable by seismographs here on, even boreholes don't pick them up. But the way they pick them up is by GPS. And the GPS stations are littered all over the Pacific Northwest. As you can see here, I'm not sure if this is a complete map. I know we have them all over the place now. But these are the stations and station codes of all the different GPS stations we have. They drill into bedrock. They put the legs of the GPS receiver in the ground, and then they cement them. So there's no way that wind is going to cause it to move, because they're extremely sensitive now. Before they could, you had your GPS, it could tell you within, a matter of a couple feet where the location was. Now it's down to millimeters, like 1 or 2 millimeters. So the margin of error is almost nil. But this is run by the Panga network out of Central Washington University, which is headed by Tim Melbourne, and they have real-time data that's coming in every second, and so they usually collect those, process them, and give like a daily total of whatever everything that's happened over that 24-hour period. Very interesting, but I got into it and was trying to study it, and it just overloaded my mind, which isn't too hard to do sometimes at 58. But it's something that you really have to understand, and to me, that's not in my area of expertise. But they read all this stuff. They know exactly what it means, and basically, as the subduction zone continues to be pulled down, it toenails on the North American plate, and it pushes the tip of it down, and right around where the Olympic mountain range is, right in here, it causes uplift of the ground. Just like if you run your foot into a throw rug, at the end you start pushing it towards the middle, how it bubbles up and creates a dome. Well, that's what happens over here, and that's where they get the greatest amount of uplift. But as you get further away, like over here in eastern Washington, central Washington, it's very negligible. Sometimes even it doesn't really change much at all because it's so far east that it's not being lifted up. Now here it shows a chart of one of the stations, station P190 at Panga. And you can see here back to 2005 when they started that there's been steady uplift all along until almost the end of 2018. This hasn't been updated yet to take us into 2019. But as you can tell, this is north and that is east. It surely closely resembles the tilt meters, especially if you guys watch Ben's video of Yellowstone, or Mary Greeley. She also shows these. But it shows a constant uplift of the ground. And the east is going down, which makes a lot of sense because as you push one side up, it tends to drag down the other side. So, and let's go down here. This is what kind of, it looks like before they simplify it and put it into like a tilt meter. It shows the pulses up and down and shows the actual ground movement, but it's also the same time period, so it doesn't show anything super current. But you can go to the Panga. Let's look up here. You can go up here and go to the site, and you can get this information a lot with a lot of other things that will take the normal person a while to understand the data you're actually looking at. Like I said, I've been doing this for 35 years with geology, but this is like a whole new area that I've never really gotten into much. It's very interesting and collaborates a lot of work that's been done, but it's I still find it fascinating. Just I don't usually get enough time to spend doing this and trying to interpret it. I guess one of these days I'm just going to have to make the 100-mile trip over to Ellensburg to meet with Tim Melbourne and see if either him or one of his associates can kind of clue me in on what's going on over there and what does it all mean. But I know enough about the Cascadia subduction zone that I know it's not getting any better. It's only getting worse. As we get more uplift, more pressure being put on the subduction zone, eventually it's going to pop, and we're going to be in a world of hurt here for quite a while. But that's why I'd also like to talk to you guys about being prepared. If you're in a danger zone where you have major hazards, don't count on your government to come rescue you like the white knight in shining armor. You're going to have to depend on yourselves. And, I've seen some guys that come out and with this is what you must have in your bug out bag or your survival kit. The way I look at it, it needs to be tailored to the individual. What do you really need? And I'm not saying, only 3 days of supplies or 2 weeks. But if you're in up here in the Pacific Northwest, where, and I would even extend it down further, in further California, I'd say the whole West Coast should be prepared, because you can never guarantee that it's going to stick to one area. You may be outside of the subduction zone, but having a 9-point earthquake just to the north of you is not going to leave your area in pristine condition like it was before. But I would definitely plan out even up to 6 months or maybe even longer, depending on where you're at, before help's going to come. And, I know one lady, she has kind of a prepping channel. She does a lot of canning. Well, canning is good to get you by for a while, but, it doesn't have an extended shelf life. And you don't want to make it through the mega quake and tsunami just to end up dying because you ate bad canned food. But, any of your non-perishable foods, canned food, and, there's many of the like My Patriot supplies, things like that have food that's good on the shelf for 25 years or better. Those can be so pricey. And I know a lot of you guys are, like most of us are living paycheck to paycheck. But what I would suggest is every time you go to the grocery store, pick up a couple cans or, a little extra every time, and take that and go out and put it in your area where you're keeping your survival food. And water, bottled water here in, the Seattle, Tacoma area are fairly cheap, and you can get them on sale sometimes for, $2-3 for a case of water. That's one way of storing food and water, and it's cheap. Or you could go to a little bit more expensive 5-gallon bottles of spring water, and to rent the cooler that goes with it. Now, of course, when the earthquake comes, if we're still around by then, they're not going to come out and take your cooler away because you can't go to work to get the money to pay for it. So don't worry with that aspect. Plus, it's nice to have ice cold water. But, for people that have dogs, you're going to have pet food. And even though that I know, like our 2 dogs, our boys, our little Maltese, he's only like 6-7 pounds. He's very picky. But like I try to tell my wife, that will go away when his stomach is empty and growling. He'll eat anything. But that's where I'd go with the canned dog food. I'm not sure how long bagged dry food will last. But sometimes you can check on that or research it. And if you're on medications, try to keep as much medication on hand as possible. I know a lot of times insurances won't let you have more than a certain day's worth of medication. That's going to become an issue. I'd strongly advise to have at least 1 or 2 firearms in the house and enough ammunition. I'd say a few or up to 4 or 5 boxes of ammunition, because when something like this happens, it's going to get very chaotic. You can take good, law-abiding Americans, when things start going like that to where they can't get food anymore to feed their family, it can make them start to turn kind of ugly. So I would keep an area of your house, if you're going to shelter at home, shelter in place, somewhere in case your house does to partially collapse, you can still fairly easily reach your supplies from the outside. That's what I do. And I would say that it's really important to have a plan, have a way of communicating with your families that are outside of your home. Uh, Portable handheld ham radios are perfect because, well, when everything is going well, you can talk almost all around the world on these things because of repeaters and things. But in a crisis situation where the power grid is gone and going to be gone for quite a while, um, you're going to have problems reaching long distances. But ham operators are overall pretty decent people, especially when they know a crisis is in place. If you need to reach your son, daughter, mother, father outside of your range, they can pass on the information, and you could even give them their phone number, and they could call them from where they're at and let them know your message. And, there's just so many things that you can do to prepare, not only for, a mega quake. We have severe storms. We just had a really nasty snowstorm, probably the worst in 35 years here from Everett all the way down to Tacoma, where we've had well over a foot of snow accumulated over a few storm systems. I remember in, was it 2008, I believe, 2009, we had a severe windstorm that knocked our power out. Some people were out for a week or two with no power. It's hard to cook. You don't have no electricity, no heat. But there is one thing, and this is all improv. I didn't think about this before I started the video. But go on to YouTube here and search for rocket stove. And with just using the cement cinder blocks, you can create a very effective source of cooking heat. Plus, you can also keep yourself a little bit warm, but you don't want to build that indoors. It's only an outdoor type stove that only takes little twigs, no big logs. It provides so much heat that it'll cook anything. It'll boil water, it'll cook steaks, it'll cook eggs or whatever you need to cook. And you're only talking about maybe 8 to 10 blocks. And it can be assembled very rapidly and moved in case you have to leave your home or kind of leave the area. So that's what I would suggest. Okay, let's take a look at this map here. Now, not only does the Panga array show slow slip movements, it also shows a clockwise rotation of the west coast. And the longer the arrow on the diagram, the longer the movement is on the map of that area of the crust. And nobody knows why certain areas move more than others, but you got to remember over here on the subduction zone, it's not subducting straight into under North America. It's coming in a northeasterly direction. So the Juan de Fuca is pushing North America here. And down here, the big culprit is the San Andreas Fault, where the Pacific plate is moving at a northwesterly direction. So from the subduction zone, you have the Pacific plate all giving it a big shove clockwise until it hits up here what's known as the Canadian buttress. And it's a mountain range there that's not moving whatsoever and has enough weight behind it and strength to stop the rotation passing over it and continuing on. But this is pretty fascinating, and this was kind of unexpected result of the Panga program. But and even over here in Nevada, Nevada is kind of tearing itself apart as it's going along with the rotation here. The rest of it's still just going to the southwest, so it's going to create a big rift zone eventually someday. which I found it really cool. We traveled a couple of years ago. I took my daughter and the grandkids down to Disneyland, Universal Studios, and to the Grand Canyon. And the reason I was invited along is because I'm my grandson's caregiver, and also turned out to be the the chauffeur for most 90% of the trip. But we stopped in Beatty, Nevada, and did a little rock hounding since we didn't have enough time, and I didn't know if I could get into the canyon to pick up some 2.5 billion year old rockets from the bottom. But that's for another video. That was a really good trip for me. Yeah, that's really cool. All the things that are associated with the subduction zone. And you know, too, that this rotation here also creates stress and strain on the terrain over in central Washington, eastern Washington. As it's being compressed together, it starts coming up from Oregon, which is, eventually starts here, but Oregon is being pressed up on Washington. And here you got the buttress where it isn't going anymore. It's like an accordion, if anybody has ever seen one, being pushed back together. It's starting to crunch central Washington here. And that's why we have so much uplift, bending of the topography over here. And I'll try to do some more on that in a later video. There's so much to talk about, but I'm just trying to figure out all the things that you guys like, what your knowledge is. I don't want to, I don't want you to click off my videos because you don't understand what I'm talking about. But then again, too, I don't want to simplify it to where I'm talking like down to you guys, like you don't know anything. But if you guys ever comment, which I hope you do, I was kind of disappointed in my last video. I only had Alan was the only one who commented on my video. But I'd really like you guys to let me know, what's your level of education, if you have any at all in geology. So that way I can tailor these to your needs and liking. Because I don't want you just to start watching this and click off of it and never hear the full length video. I try to get these as educational as possible, give you enough information so when the video is over, you can actually learn something that if you live in this area could be, very beneficial to you in the case that it ruptures in our lifetime. Okay, well, please remember, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. I'd like you guys to share it to the people that that enjoy this and turn them onto our channel. Channel is growing, but it's growing almost about the same speed as the subduction zone, about the length of your fingernails grow. But we're making progress. We need to get this out to more people, let people know what's going on. And I don't give you assumptions. I don't tell you false information. Everything that I research is solid geology information. I don't guess. Now, sometimes I may say, this is my theory, but I'm not a conspiracist. I'm not a fearmonger. And that can, sound like that sometimes when you're talking about like the Cascadia subduction zone, because that is going to be such a major event for the West Coast. It's awful hard not to sound like you're a fearmonger, but I don't put it as a fear-mongering. I look at it as putting out information that will be crucial to you if this event happens in your lifetime, or while you're living here in the Northwest. So please share this, get it out, give me a thumbs up, let me know how everything's going, and I look forward to seeing you guys on our next video. Okay, take care, guys.